Hey everybody, welcome back. We are at Atlas Lens Company in beautiful downtown Burbank. My name is Mark Irwin, ASC and CSC, and we are doing a live stream called Viewfinder Visions. And I'm going to introduce this guy in a minute. The premise is that a cinematographer, that would be me, talks to another cinematographer, and we talk about, you guessed it, cinematography. So let's get into it. Let me introduce you to Eigil Bryld, who's a Danish cinematographer who has shot many, many films. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
We live in a world of cinematographers with names like Haskell and Chivo and Vilmos and Vittorio, and perhaps not everyone is aware of Eigil Bryld, but we are aware of your films. And those films, we're looking at clips right now. This is one of the most memorable, In Bruges. You shot Kinky Boots, Ocean's 8, a film right now on Netflix called No Hard Feelings, The Wizard of Lies, these are the ones that we want to look at, House of Cards, and currently a film that's getting a lot of award season buzz called The Holdovers.
Go see it.
Go see it, yes. It's a phenomenal film, and I think 2 nights ago it won
two Golden Globes, yeah. For Giamatti for Best Lead and a Comedy, and Divine for Best Supporting. So it was a good night.
And it's a very, very good film. So that is, of a list of things, that is kind of the end of the list. Currently, I want to start at the beginning. Tell us where you started and how you started.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Denmark, and I was really into. I loved movies, but I had no idea. It seemed like I'm from a family of academics, and I had no idea how to make movies. So, but I was also really into documentaries, and that's what I wanted to do. And so when I graduated from high school, I went to this film college in Wales, in Newport Gwent, and which was basically a basic film and video production course. There wasn't really much video back then. It was all film. And the college also had a documentary photography course run by David Hearn, a Magnum photographer. So, and I was friends with a lot of those people, and we sort of we could share classes or whatever. So for a long time, my intention was to do documentaries basically and travel the world. But then I moved to Cardiff, and I was close to really great art house cinema, Chapter Cinema, and they showed a lot of Cronenberg and Kieslowski movies and
Cronenberg, that's
Cronenberg. Yeah, no, I was you're familiar with you know him well. I mean, yeah. And that really sort of started changing my mind and thinking, well, maybe this is something to sort of venture into. So, but I did a good run in documentaries, and then I basically worked my way up, and I did no budget films, short films. Eventually, I did me and 2 friends, a producer and a director. We did a movie called The 18th that we sort of financed with basically with no money, and we would just get product placement, and it went to MoMA, New York, new directors, new films, and then I was sort of in the loop.
And these were Danish films, or
these were all Danish films, yeah.
So when the film In Bruges was shot in Bruges, but with an Irish director, I believe, in English language.
Correct.
Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. Mm-hmm. How did you get connected to that film? 2008.
Well, I mean, because I did that movie, The 18th, that led me on to, I met this director, the director James Marsh, and we became friends, and we did a little movie, sort of an art, it's a hybrid between fiction and documentary called The Wisconsin Death Trip, which is a black and white and color movie that we shot in Wisconsin. It's kind of a period movie, so it's looking at Wisconsin 100 years ago and at Wisconsin now. And that was for the BBC, and then that led me on to Julian Jarrell, the director, saw that, and he asked me to do a 2-part miniseries for the BBC, Crime and Punishment, that we shot in St. Petersburg, and and all the stage work in England, and then I did a couple of other things, and then that led on to me doing Becoming Jane with Anne Hathaway in Ireland, and those were the same producers that were doing In Bruges. So it's all, I mean, like we know, it's
Yeah.
everything is interconnected, and a lot of the business is obviously about, you know, who you meet, and because it's not only your sort of ability to tell stories. It's also, you know, you need your breaks and find your way and make friends.
And for those of you out there who are film school graduates or starting out, making friends, making connections, that's really part of the process that will lead from a small town in Denmark to Hollywood. It's funny, you and I have both worked, we're both from different countries. I'm from Canada. We work in Hollywood, work in America, and you've done work on House of Cards and kind of inside the American structure. How does that make you feel? Because to me, I'm always thinking, I'm just this kid from Mississauga, what do I know?
But I think that's our strength, is that we have an outside perspective in a way. And but I've always been interested. I mean, I've always been interested in politics and sort of power struggles, and so I was very I mean, I was for many reasons I was happy about doing House of Cards, because it was and House of Cards, and also because I did then later on I got to do Wizard of Lies. So House of Cards deals with the political sort of landscape.
Yeah.
Wizard of Lies is sort of the financial. Then I also did the Report with Adam Driver, directed by Scott Burns, which is about sort of the intelligence services and reporting. And then I did some of the TV show with Russell Crowe about Roger Ailes and Fox News.
Right.
And so I was very happy to sort of had a run at those kind of sort of movies that dealt with topics that really sort of that I followed, and all of that stuff goes back to my documentary days, because and so
I wanted to ask you about that. Does your documentary, well, just call it an eye, a perspective, how did that serve you in a narrative form? What influenced your style?
I think making documentaries is really the best film school there is.
Listen closely.
Because that's where you learn to understand the space, read the room, understand what's going to happen. You know, if you're somebody holding a speech and there's the audience and somebody's going to, you know, something's going to happen, you have to know where to position yourself in the room, both in terms of what's going to happen, and also obviously with the light, and so it's and it really forces you to be sort of bare bones in terms of what images do you need to tell your story and bring your ideas across, and I think that helped me tremendously in making movies as well, because especially, I mean, working with someone like David Fincher is all about being lean and efficient, and you don't do coverage or whatever. Everything has to be 100% efficient, and you really have to tell the story. On that, we use 2 cameras, all religiously, and we would shoot both cameras from start of the scene to the end of the scene. Everything had to be 100% efficient, and I like that sort of mentality where you don't just go out and sort of try and cover yourself,
right.
but you follow an idea, and then you shoot the images in the right order. You start with the most important shot, the shot you need. I mean, which doesn't have to be the wide shot of the master or whatever. It's like the one shot that tells the story, because very often I find when you break down the scene beforehand, you think you need like 8 shots.
Right.
But if you do the most important shot, then the whole scene is going to shape a little bit around that, because the axis is going to sort of fold into that, to where that camera is. And then I think as you work your way through it, very often you find out after you've done 4 setups, maybe it's like, okay, we have the scene now. All the rest, you know, maybe we don't need the wide shot, maybe we don't need that insert, maybe we don't. So I really, I've always sort of taken pride in being fast and deliver the story also for the actors, because
Yeah.
keeping it sort of tied together, I think, is important, and not breaking things up. I mean, and especially nowadays, it's possible. Like back in the day with slow films and slow lenses or whatever, you know, it took a lot of time to turn around.
Yeah. Well, let me ask
that-
you that about film. For example, you shot In Bruges, obviously on film, and digital wasn't a thing then. I'm just looking at my notes. An Airy Cam was Zeiss Master Primes, and Ingenue. What film stock did you use? How much ASA did you have to work with?
I mean, when I shot films, because I shot all film up until I did a movie with David Chase called Not Fade Away, which was a period movie, but we went for digital, and that was my first time. But usually shooting film, I would usually pick one film stock and pretty much shoot all of it. And I think in Bruges, it was probably, I don't think it was called 5219 back then, but it was the 500 ASA stock. And
Now, you and I haven't spoken before. This is exactly my philosophy. I would have AC saying, "You sure you don't want?" And they'd have 4 stocks and use this and change this and that mag. Short end, we don't have enough. And I said, I don't want to do that. I want one film stock.
Yeah.
You can shoot outside, inside. So I'm glad you said that. I feel vindicated somehow.
I mean, I think it's that simplicity, but it's just, and I mean, like I did Becoming Jane, I shot it all in a daylight stock even.
Yeah.
Though a lot of it is candle lit, but obviously that really sort of makes that contrast of color, and you really distinguish. But it's a philosophy I sort of carry through onto digital as well, because I usually make one lot for digital. You know,
Right.
I think of a lot of a custom sort of film stock in a way, and I usually base it on I build it from the sort of characteristics of a whatever film stock is sort of makes sense, and then I tweak it, and then I pretty much stick with that a lot. I know some people work with like
I know. Custom
tons of
everything, yeah.
custom everything, and that's, I mean, that was my reservation about digital in the beginning, was there was too many options, and I would just get lost in it. I would just be like,
Yeah.
but now I shoot it. To me, it's just I put the lot in, and then there's a button that the AC press, you know,
Yeah.
the stop and start, and that's kind of it. I don't do a lot in the DIT tent either. I like to operate, but I like to sort of, I like to change it. I think you should do the changes in front of the camera, and not
Oh, yes.
in the sort of digital realm.
So when you mention operating, the European system versus the North American system, it's also in the UK, where you have an operator. How did that work, changing from one to the other, or does it work?
I mean, it was difficult for me in the beginning because I operated everything. The first movie I did where I didn't operate was a British movie called To Kill a King, and it was very. I had a really hard time, sort of, not being by the camera, because I think if you're at the camera, you have a relationship with the actors, but also you're in the perfect. If something changes, you can just look up and see, oh, the flag has sagged and something changed. You sort of. And you can sort of operate from there. I thought it was really difficult to be on the outside looking in. I've gotten better at it, but I still prefer to operate. And on House of Cards, I operated all the stuff with Fincher. But then when he left, and since we were 2 cameras, then I didn't want to operate because I wanted to know what both cameras were doing. But since then, I've started. If I have 2 cameras, I'll just have 2 monitors, so I can not so I can sort of look over their shoulder,
spy on them.
but just to have a sense of when we have the scene. Is that thing again where it's I don't want to overshoot anything, and I think instinctively you learn over time, and you just know, we have the scene. It's time to move on.
The nice thing about a perspective, I find, and this is a note for anyone who is starting out, if you operate the camera, you are seeing the entire set from the camera's perspective. Mm-hmm. If someone's operating the camera and you're 20 feet away in a tent watching a monitor, you are just seeing that. So the inspiration for anything, or the inclination to say, what about a pan, what about this? You don't have that. You're in Cyclops vision as a spectator instead of a participant or an instigator. So one silly question, there's kind of a legendary perspective on cinematographers that they will pre-rig like 40 lights and then come on the set and say, oh, turn that one off, turn that. And now, so they turn off 28 lights and that shows that they're some sort of genius, instead of rigging those 18 lights to begin with. And how do you light from big to small, or how does it work for you?
I mean, it's very different. I mean, I think on some movies, like some movies like The Holdovers, is very much about sort of pure filmmaking. So we would, be careful about picking the time of day we wanted to shoot, even if it's interiors, and sort of making the best use of shaping the available light. We know, okay, it's going to be shady here. We can block these windows, and but the polar opposite is something like Ocean's 8, because on Ocean 8 we had a huge cast, all big stars, and I knew it would be very difficult to force us into very specific windows because there's so many things going on. So on a movie like that, I sort of pretty much stripped away all sort of available light and then just basically build it up from scratch. But I tend to, I usually, you have to pre-rig often, just because for speed and efficiency, but I still try and keep it sort of keep it fairly simple. I don't want to over-rig, and I don't want to over-engineer anything. I think there has to be room for there has to be wiggle room. You don't want to choke yourself with too much.
Oh yes. Well, just so everyone remembers, I have two sets of questions: arts and crafts, which is dealing with actors and directors, and then nuts and bolts, which is dealing with cameras, technocranes, lighting. I'm going to ask you, what kind of lights do you use? Are you an LED panel person, or how things evolved?
I mean, obviously, I came out of tungsten, and HMI was really sort of all we had when I started out, and for a long time, and I was never a huge fan of HMI, to be honest. I thought it was very difficult to get a good quality on it. I know it can be done, but I am also an opportunist. So with time, I have really sort of embraced LED and for its sort of versatility, and because you can change color on the fly. I mean, because back in the day with tungsten light, obviously you couldn't really dim it because it would go warm.
So it was all the dance of the gels and everything.
Dance of the gels and climbing up there, and the barn doors would fall off, and so I think it's something that could be done, but you have to be sort of.
Here's some notes. We're just looking at pieces from the Holdovers. Now, this was shot modern day, and it's a period thing. Did you use modern lights or period lights?
Well, I mean, it's interesting with this because in the beginning because we wanted to make this movie not sort of pretending, oh, this is the 70s. We actually wanted to make it so it looked like it was made in 1970.
Yeah.
So initially I thought, okay, I'll recreate all the circumstances. So I started looking for arc lights. I was looking, for to basically go down that route, but obviously you can't really. I mean, arc lights would have been a terrible mistake. They're very cumbersome. You have to have special generators, and they're not even around anymore.
You can't get arc light operators.
No,
you actually need an operator in each light. People will
exactly
remember that.
Exactly. I think there's a place in the Midwest that do these sort of for display lights or whatever, and they use arc, whatever. But obviously that was a silly idea. But then, because the idea was that we are a low-budget movie shot in 1970, and I started thinking about the movies of the era that I really loved and that sort of shaped me. And obviously in the 70s there was a lot of, people broke away from the studios. They did movies, in the streets, and 16 mil handheld or whatever.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, well, maybe that's rather than sort of making this sort of a technological sort of exercise or whatever, or I want to sort of capture that spirit of the time. And then I started thinking, well, if this was 1970 and we were a low-budget movie, I would shoot this on digital. I would, and then I started embracing that. Then we started testing film versus digital. And obviously the film stock nowadays kind of looks digital in a way, because it was, I'm old enough to remember the film stocks before Telecine, because now Telecine obviously made they made Kodak sort of change the characteristics of the film stocks, so they're really optimized for digital transfer. So in order to get the grain and all of that, if we shot on film, we would have had to degrain the film, so make the film look like digital, and then make the digital then look like film again. And I thought that was silly, so we started building a lot for digital and putting some of those characteristics in, and then there was a lot of.
So the grain characteristics, as well as the color, it had a kind of a shadow of an ectochrome feel to it, which was
a lot of it is underexposed as well, because obviously in the 70s people didn't want grain, and if you look carefully at those films, they're really only grainy when they couldn't, when they're underexposed, when they had to underexpose, if it's a night exterior, whatever.
Yeah.
So I would have the same philosophy. I would shoot a really high ASA at night and sort of build that sort of thin negative sort of feel into the exposure. So it was really sort of it was a lot of sort of incremental steps to shape the whole thing, and it took some planning in terms of how we shot it and sort of the philosophy and the approach.
Did you have the grain applied while you were shooting? So you
no,
could, that was all in post.
Yeah.
So you were still, just call it a clean image, and then you added stuff in post as a global effect.
We used a live grain, which is basically something you buy a license and then you can use it. But the good thing about, we tested all sorts of, we shot our own grain, but the trouble about grain is if you it very easily becomes just like a filter that sits over the whole image. And grain obviously shows up differently in terms of in the highlights or the shadows or whatever. And with live grain, you can apply it very sort of deliberate. And so we didn't do it, so for certain scenes we did more of it, for other scenes we did less of it.
Right.
And it's a really it takes a long time to do it, because when you see an image first and you see the grain, but gradually your brain starts dialing it out. So you can very easily end up in a situation, which we did, where you dial up the grain, you dial it up, then you come back the next day and you're horrified. You think, oh, what have we done? And you have to sort of start over again. And but we did that. We did halation, we did chemical stains, we did lots of different.
And when you see the film, you won't see any of this. Your
No.
brain will see it. You'll feel that this looks different. It isn't slick. It is a digital origin. One thing I noticed about the lighting style was there was not a lot of deliberate backlight. If it was environmental, some people will light the room and then the close-up comes from that lighting. And this is how it kind of felt, that when Paul Giamatti and Divine would sit together and smoke and have a bottle of Jim Beam or whatever it was, there was a lamp, that was what was lighting it all.
It's funny because I've always, since I started out, had a little bit of an issue with backlight, because I think what backlight, for me, it very easily turns into like a hair light, which I really don't like, or it turns into, or becomes very sharp. So it's something that really has to sort of, that I have to be subtle with, and I'm very much from the sort of Raphael school of painting, where you have sort of the imperceptibles fall off from light to darkness, and that sort of. I like sort of contrast between foreground and background, so I very often try and create separation, but without backlight. And when I use backlight, I'm very conscious about sort of not overdoing it, because I think it could be I think it works better when it's very subtle. I like, that's something that actually Fincher taught me. And it was those sort of very fine sort of kickers which we would do on House of Cards with vertical kino flows, and we would sort of sneak them in for liners, very close in, but really subtle, just for jaw lines and really help sort of sculpt the portraits.
I'm going to just leap in and look at this. We're looking at a monitor. It's looking at this, but a kind of larceny mixed. Rom-com called No Hard Feelings, and this had all of us DPs have to be chameleons. You can't just shoot, or you can, but then you live in that pigeonhole. And this had a radically different style from, certainly from House of Cards or Witness of Lies. Had this been done before the Holdovers?
This was done after the Holdovers.
Yeah.
So, but it came out before, just because the Holdovers is supposedly a Christmas movie.
So you can see, in terms of glow, rather than what I call look at me lighting, you know, where you have a hot liner because you balanced it all down and it had this shape rather than a distinct backlight, which seems to be a kind of a European thing. I think that for me, I'm always rigging the backlight first and then dimming it, or I use fluorescence, so it's a kind of glow. But the vertical tube liner that accentuates the jawline, that is a classic. But this film was so well visualized to tell the story.
I mean, we had a lot of fun doing it, and it's not really true that I don't like backlight, but I just think if I do backlight and then I want the key to sort of originate from that backlight as well. I don't like if you have like a 3/4 frontal key and then if there's too many directions on it. I always try to make it sort of kind of one source that lives together, which I'm sure you're doing. And I mean, but this clip is a good, not this one, but the beginning of the movie and where they meet with the tow truck that we saw a minute ago. That's a really good lesson in picking your location, and because we had picked another location because we knew we had to shoot there for a long time. We're shooting comedy, so we know you have to do a lot of takes, you have to do a lot of improv, so we were shooting from Montauk, but we had to shoot in Long Island, so it was very difficult to find the right house. But we found a great house that would double as Montauk, and then and it was north facing, so it was perfect. We would always have backlight. We could really keep consistency. And then, like, I think 5 days before we were gonna shoot, and it was the first day of the movie, we lost that location because the neighbors didn't like the idea of. So we had to go with this other location, which was east facing, which is obviously not a great if you have to shoot there all day.
Yes.
So
then the planet is not your friend. The sun is on the other side.
Then the planet is not your friend, and there's only so much you can do. So it's really one of those. But we had to roll with it, and we had to embrace it, and we sort of made it work. But it's a really good lesson in, obviously it's picking your location, thinking about where's it facing, how's the sun going to move around. That's really that's number one in our line of work, sort of being able to.
That's the nuts and bolts of what we have to do to be, then stand back and be invisible.
Because if you're smart about those choices, very often you don't have to do a lot. You know, I mean, I tend not to. I prefer to, like I think all DPs do, and is to shoot at the right time of day, and but that becomes a collaborative effort as well, because obviously the director has to be in on it, the first AD, you have to be able to schedule it that way. The actors have to, are going to have, it's going to be like, oh, we need to get this in, before 2 o'clock, because at 2 o'clock it's too late. But if you do it that way, I think it's a very efficient way to work as well, because very often you don't have to do very much. You get into trouble when like the classic thing. We all been in this situation where you're shooting and it's turning. It gets darker and darker and it's turning into night, and you have to sort of light for day all of a sudden. And then you're just into because it takes a lot of time to light,
night for day,
exactly. But and the slower you are, the darker it's going to get, and it's just that sort of catching. It never really works, and at that point you really have to, you sort of failed in anticipating what's going to happen, and but that's where it's really. You have to be able to present that case and sort of make sure the director's on board, the first AD, the cast, everybody sort of needs to understand that, this is the window that we have, and we have to make the most out of it. And then
see, here is proof that no matter how big or small the budget is, you're still going to be 10 minutes to sunset, and everyone will freak out. My common thing is to tell producers and directors and ADs, the sun is going down while we're eating breakfast. So don't pretend it's getting dark. When it is getting dark, then it's too late. And I always ask them, and this is the nuts and bolts of our job. I ask before lunch, where do we want to be an hour after lunch? And you're modulating the day. And this is when we all step back and people say, well, that looked kind of grainy. It looked like they lost the light. Well, they is me and everybody else, but it's just us cinematographers who made it look grainy.
Yeah.
So we're
And there isn't really much you can do.
Yeah.
At that point, it's like, you can do super tight, silly close up. It's going to take a long time and it's not going to be great, but every now and again, we have to do it.
That's the one I refer to, the one that got away. you
Yeah.
know. So a different film, like, I was very taken by The Wizard of Lies because it was a big film about a big person who ends up kind of getting smaller and trapped. What was your philosophy in lighting it and shooting? By the way, this is a film about Bernie Madoff that Robert De Niro portrays him, and it's an astounding film. I love the fact that now on HD, anything streaming, you can go to IMDb. This is Prime. I can go to that. $2.99. I can rent it for 30 days. This is how we study the extended film school. We never graduate. We're always going to class. But I wanted to ask you about that.
Well, I mean, in terms of lighting, a lot of the obviously he was into shady business, and he was forced to sort of live in the shades as well. So I knew from the beginning a lot of it, like, cause what happened is also it also follows his wife who sort of has to live behind drawn curtains or whatever. So a lot of it sort of was the contrast between sort of living in the dark and then also sort of the spotlight of the press and the sort of the almost surgical literally the public eye sort of looking for the truth. So it's a film with a lot of contrast in it, and a lot of zooms as well, and I think the zooms work really well because I know zooms can sort of go in and out of fashion or whatever, but I think the beautiful thing about the zoom is that you're really just enlarging the image. You're not sort of getting in closer or whatever, and it reminds me of back in the day when stills were used and you had the rostrum camera and you sort of zoomed in and out, which I think is a very I love moving the camera, but I think there's a quality to zooms that's sort of detached somehow, but still sort of investigative.
Were these combined with dolly moves? Because I saw the film, I watched it twice, and I don't remember any overt zoom, so it must have been very subtle.
It was typically very, very slow zooms.
Yeah.
Barry is, I love working with Barry. He's so sort of, he's so clever with his energy and he's so sort of restless and focused at the same time. So with Barry, you typically shoot two cameras. You're usually on a zoom, and you never do the same setup twice. Or if you do a tracking shot, you never do the same tracking shot twice.
So a different frame size.
Well, yeah, he wants options rather than sort of the perfect tracking shot or whatever. And when we did Wizard of Lies, we'd worked on You Don't Know Jack with Al Pacino as well about Kevorkian.
Yeah.
So I sort of knew his style. So the second time around, I started sort of pre-laying tracks, so I could at least, so I didn't just have to sort of change frame size, but I could also change camera positions. But working with Barry is also, he doesn't like to rehearse really. You rarely block the scene. So you sort of have to anticipate a little bit what's going to happen. He likes to just unleash the actors onto the set. But working with Barry made me realize that obviously you can sort of then start, where you put the camera is important to how the actor is going to, behave in the room. And so you can start sort of designing and anticipating what's going to happen. You can move the furniture around, and then you sort of get to a point where you almost don't need a rehearsal, because when they come into the room, it's natural to walk this way, and you come around this way, and they know there's a camera over there, so they're going to want to go in that direction.
Right.
But we shot like a big ballroom scene with where De Niro comes in, and we just set up like 3 cameras, and then we sort of unleashed it. We hadn't rehearsed it or anything like that, and
That was the one where he's on the phone and he kind of sneaks away to take these calls.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then there was a giant kind of beach party tent scene that was very grand, but it was all, the scale of it was all people related. And a lot of films that I've seen lately are 2 shots and over shoulders, and this managed to have those as well as the scope. I think the problem is a lot of directors used to watch things on a 3 or 7-inch monitor, and they would say, well, the wide shot doesn't work. Well, people aren't watching it at home on a 3-inch monitor, so that you were able to find the scope.
I think that was in collaboration with Barry as well, because I think with the things him and I have done, we've been good at sort of integrating the wide shots into this, so it doesn't become like you don't step out of the scene and look at it from the outside, but you sort of get the scope in whilst being in and amongst the scene. I mean, one of the things that I really love about the movies from the 70s and all those DPs back in the day, like Michael Chapman, and they're always talking about the point of view, you know, where we're seeing the scene from, you know, where do we put are we inside the scene, are we observing it from the outside?
Very, very strong.
A lot of contrast.
Yeah. Now, what was this shot with? What camera and lens?
This was shot on film.
Oh, okay.
Because it must have been, and it would have been. I had a long run where I would only shoot master primes because I was out of the philosophy that I just wanted the best possible glass.
Yeah.
And then whatever, if I wanted it soft, I would have to do it, you know, in my lighting or whatever. So no, it wouldn't be master primes because it was zooms. So it would have been Optimo, Ingenieur Optimo with 12 to 1s, and then for whenever we did handheld or whatever, it would have been master primes. I mean, those were the lenses I used for many years on everything. Even period movies, I would shoot master prime anamorphics as well. But I've eased up a little bit.
And this one is?
This is Ocean's 8.
Ocean's 8, which is a really stylized caper film. There was a scene in the Met Gala kind of outdoor dining thing. How did you light that? Was that really outside, or? I
mean, we shoot inside. This is actually shot in Los Angeles. The whole sort of steps going up to the Met. It's very hard to shoot at the Met because they don't close for anybody except for the Met Gala. So we couldn't shut it down. So we had to shoot at night. We had to bring all our equipment in every day and take it all back out again. All the set dressing, everything.
Yeah.
So it was a big sort of logistical undertaking. We could rig a little bit of lights inside, but obviously every time we put a light up, somebody had to measure how tall it was and then the radius to make sure that if it fell over, it couldn't hit anything, because obviously we were shooting around, you know, the real.
Oh, this was you were blended in with real A-lister things.
Exactly, inside the Met, which was a mad undertaking, but the inside staircase is.
That was in L.A.
No, the tent outside is L.A. but the staircase is inside with the carpet. That's the real Met, and then all of this, most of the rest of the stuff is really shot at the Met, which is we actually started building the whole set, and at a great, but then there was lots of complications with that, and then they figured out, oh, let's go and shoot at the Met instead, which was
making simple things complicated.
Exactly. But it worked out so, and it was just, I mean, I remember. I have some of my best memories of making films. I remember we were shooting there. We had lunch in the middle of the night, and I could sleep underneath the Egyptian, the temple at Glendale, and I mean, have a 20-minute nap. So and also walking around in the Met at night, and you know, obviously we were very restricted in terms of where we could walk or whatever. But the feeling of having all that sort of beautiful art to yourself was pretty amazing. And I mean, the Met made it work. I mean, they embraced it. So
when I don't know what our time is. It's pretty good. I'm going to ask you about In Bruges, because that's almost an art gallery, the whole city unto itself. And in terms of the scope of it all, it started. You had kind of a handheld feel walking in there in the boat. Could you kind of track us through your progression in terms of lighting and shooting?
I mean, it was really important for me and Martin to sort of really feel like we were with these guys, that we actually, you know, we're going to Bruges with these two crazy people.
They're just Irish. They're not crazy.
No, but
Well, you know.
but they have a little bit of blood on their hand, and there's a lot of so we try to sort of really bring the camera in close and be with them, and then in terms of lighting, I mean, because Bruges it is like a museum, or that's what it turned into, and but it's a difficult town city to shoot. Because basically there's only tiny little bridges leading into it, so it's very hard to get equipment in. And also there's so many canals, so a street is really not just because it's typically a street and then a canal, so there was these massive spaces. But Martin had done a really clever thing when he wrote the script. He went to Bruges. He actually stayed in that hotel room, the main room. And overlooking the canal, and he would, as he wrote it, he would walk the paces and think, oh, if you run around the corner, you're going to end up in this courtyard. So when we went there, obviously we had to shoot. We had to then build the hotel room, a copy of it for the majority of the shoot. And it's only when he jumps out the window we're in the real hotel room, but we shot it sort of to size to make it practical. But
so that hotel room was a set, or was it built?
Well, it was a real existing hotel room. We just built a copy of it, 30% bigger.
That's what I meant. Yeah,
exactly.
Like the real windows.
And then we had green screen outside, and we did plates, and then we had to obviously when he jumps out the window, we had to shoot at a real location. But that whole approach, it's sort of, we all done movie. There's so much effort or sort of energy on a lot of movies going into, you know, making all these cheats. You run around the corner and you're somewhere else, and we have to shoot this in Toronto, and it has to match with this in Michigan, which is beautiful and fun at times. But doing in Bruges was a little bit. I started thinking of it a little bit like a theater play, and I'm thinking, well, this whole city is actually a little bit like a backdrop. It's because it is also lit for photography in a way. So I started augmenting, you know, really lighting from the canal and sort of making it look like a postcard, because we wanted the city to be sort of a character in itself, and making it a little bit sort of conceptually theatrical, but done in a sort of naturalistic way, as as a bit of a contradiction. But
the square, the town squares, whatever, the outdoor cafes, there were lots of kind of garlands of light bulbs that were a focus thing, and then the tower, I guess I'll call it a tower, spire. Was that a build as well for the dialogue?
Yeah, the inside was.
Yeah.
So, because it was impossible to get equipment up there, we had to shoot plates from up there, and that was done with a combination of trans lights and green screen, because we couldn't afford to do it all green screen. So, so that became a little bit of a headache. But that was built on, in a warehouse basically in Bruges, because initially we were going to shoot all location in Bruges and then stage work in England, but because of actors' availability or whatever, it became one big jumble, and we had to do everything.
Best laid plans.
Best laid plans, exactly.
So that was your first Christmas movie, and your second Christmas movie is The Holdovers.
I know, it's
nobody died in that one. I wanted to say in Bruges, when it's kind of the end of the struggle in the spire, and Brendan Gleeson's character leaps. That was quite a splat. We've done all kinds of action films. That one shocked me. That was bloody good. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean that took a lot of engineering, because obviously we had to do the drop cam on set, and we had to dig a hole that we could put him in, and but again, I think with all good sort of action, and it's always about sort of the point of view, you know, not as it, but again where we see in the scene from, you know, and that's really, I think that's how you sort of get your way out of, you know, covering things from all the, you know, don't look at all the different angles you can do. Look at, where you want to see it from. Are you inside the scene? Are you seeing it from somebody's point of view? Are you looking at it from the outside? Very much like if you read a book, is it first person, second person? Is
Right.
it is it a godly view? Is it I think every image has to have an author, and you always have to think, who is where does this shot come from? And that's really, if you think of it that way, then it's remarkable how few camera angles you can tell a scene with. You don't have to see it from every which angle. You have to know where you want to see it from, and I think that's and that makes lighting way easier as well, because then all of a sudden you don't it sort of narrows down. You don't have to light for every possible angle. And
So telling stories with pictures, less is more. When it comes to planning, In Bruges was kind of a landmark film for a lot of us who saw it, and The Holdovers is kind of a pure and I feel like it's kind of a humble story.
Very humble. Yeah.
So in getting into those characters, certainly Paul Giamatti's character, did you have a thematic style or a lighting character design?
I think on that more than anything, the style. Sort of, I always try and not have too many sort of preconceived ideas going into a movie. I'm not like saying, this has to look exactly this way or the other way. I really try and go in and then sort of build it piece by piece. And on this one, obviously, a lot of it, everything is shot on location, and we had a lot of locations on this. And then I started building sort of it was a long sort of process working with the production designer, with Alexander, and just sort of shaping what this movie is going to be like. I mean, I knew I didn't want to sort of, because it's a very human story, and it's really about three characters who are sort of a little bit lost, so I knew that we had to give them space. So we had to create a style that was sort of pretty seamless and not too heavy-handed. And then you sort of make one. So when I decided to shoot digital, that sort of started shaping. Then I was thinking, why don't I push the film? Or push, I shot most of it on 1280 because I was thinking that way, if anything, you get a little more detail in the highlights, which is what you have in film as well, and you compress the toe a little bit. I thought, well, this is going to extend our day, and give us it's going to help us work with the available light, and then other than that, it's like finding really one sort of good angle for a key light, not having too many directions on my lights, and keeping that. I just wanted, the raw sort of beauty. I mean, look at that kid. I mean, he's
This was his first film.
This is his first film ever.
He'd probably get nominated, never work again, but he's fantastic.
I mean, he's so good. I mean, and I mean, yeah, but all three of them, all the three main characters, and all the rest of the cast is just phenomenal. And that's, I knew that going into this is really about these characters, and then I was thinking, well, it's portraits. It's about loneliness and sort of detachment in a certain way. So even when we did group shots, we were very conscious. Are they together in this? Even if there are two of them in the shot, should it feel like they're together, or are they still sort of separate? Right. So a lot of it was the way we talked about and tried to design the visual language was about capturing the portraits and thinking about what are these people, whoever's in the shot, what is their relation to themselves and to each other and the surroundings and.
This is the arts and crafts of cinematography, and the nuts and bolts is. So the nuts and bolts of this. What camera and what lenses? I know you may have.
That was the Panavision H series, because one of the reasons was because it has a 55mm lens, which is just beautiful. I mean, they're vintage lenses, but they're not overly sort of vintage. They don't they're not crappy on the edges or whatever.
Not like old cooks or.
Not like old cooks. I mean, they're not too soft. You feel like you're there. I mean, I've tried Baltars so many times because I really like the idea of them, but I can never. They're a bit too sort of. It's a little bit like looking through.
Looking through history.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and that was one of the balance with the Holdovers was not to make it sort of overly nostalgic or make it feel sort of, oh, this is just a bunch of stuff that already happened. I wanted it to be sort of, look of the period, but feeling sort of imminent at the same time. And then it was shot on Arri Alexa, just Arri Alexa Mini, super simple. We tested film stock and we tested all 16 mil, 35 mil, whatever. But with our sort of the means, we're very limited. We had a tiny budget as well, and it wasn't really about sort of all of that. So had we shot film, I would have had to degrain the film, make it look like digital, and then turn that digital image into looking like film again. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll just skip that first step and just shoot it digital. And then I started testing and figuring out how can I actually get that feeling of a lot of the movies we liked. One movie in particular I really loved and was a reference is The Last Detail by Hal Ashby. It was Michael Chapman's first movie, exactly, as a DP.
Yeah. And he played the cab driver in it.
And oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, he's the one who takes him to the.
Yes. He says, "You's a swabby? I thought you was a swabby."
Oh,
I remember that because I was in film school and they shot that in Toronto, and so I was using Baltars back in the early '70s, and I'm going to stir the pot a little here because we have about a 5-minute warning, and I want to ask you. This feature we have called Film Not to Miss, FNTM. So I have one on my list. You have a meeting, you're going to leave us soon. What is your secret film?
Well, I just spoiled it because you said I should think about one. I think it is The Last Detail. I think The Last Detail is its own little masterpiece. And I remember seeing it when I was a kid as well, when it came out. Yeah. I was probably a bit too young for it, but it has Jack Nicholson in it, and it's really a beautiful and I think a movie that still has relevance. It's about society, it's about class, it's about a changing society. I think it's very relevant today, and it has a look, but there's nothing dated about it. I think it's a beautiful movie that's gonna live on, and I'm not done seeing it, and I would, I think everybody should.
And it looked like itself, the way Chappie shot it. It didn't look lit, it was certainly round. The scenes in the train station are all in Toronto and Union Station, and I had been doing a student film about Union Station, so I just saw these guys shooting and hung around all night to watch. And it was an all Canadian crew except Chappie and the actors and so on. It was quite well. That's great that you linked onto that. In 1970, I had just joined the CSC. I was 20 years old, so it's a different world.
What's your movie then?
Oh, the film that I'm going to recommend to not miss is a film called. I'm going to dig out the actual details here. Called A Face in the Crowd, and if you're following politics at all, this is the same story told in a narrative style. It's about a TV star, 1957, who is a country boy who realizes I can use my power as a celebrity to influence not just politicians, but politics itself. And he becomes a monster, for lack of a better word. Andy Griffith, Patricia O'Neill, Lee Remick, and Walter Matthau. Was directed by Elia Kazan and was shot by two DPs, Harry Stradling and Gain Rescher. And Gain Rescher was one of my heroes, a New York DP. So this is the advantage of streaming. You can find this on Criterion, or if you just Google it, it'll tell you go to Prime or go to Movie or something and watch it. We never stopped going to film school. And on that note, Eigil, thank you for helping us through film school.
Nice.
I know this lucky man has a meeting in Brentwood, so that means the film business is back and cranking. It's all good news.
Thank you so much. It
And
was an
thank you
honor
for
and
the
a pleasure.
holdovers.
And a great conversation, and we'll keep talking.
Oh, yes. And everyone out there, go and see The Holdovers. It's a film that is unique certainly in the 21st century, and it's watch for it at Oscar time. There you go. Thanks very much. We'll
Thank
see you
you.
next time.